The Ford Ranger is one of the most respected, longest-lived compact trucks in the global market, with a history dating back in the U.S. to its forerunner in 1972 and continuing on to this day. Growing in size, safety, power, and capabilities over the years, the model has changed with the times and continues to be a constant challenger to being the, quote, best truck. Welcome back to All Cars, y'all. If you're new here, I am John, and this is a far too brief history of the Ford Ranger. Before the Ranger, Japanese brands began experimenting with small pickups, often based on car platforms. Mazda had produced some commercial vehicles like this three-wheeled T1500, and in 1961 introduced their B1500 four-wheeled truck with a 1.5-liter engine, making about 59 horsepower, and available in two-door, double cab, and as a light van, but all only for their domestic market. Expensive, it never sold very well. For 1965, Mazda introduced their second generation, now longer and with more square bodywork, but using essentially the same engine massaged to approximately 74 horsepower, and it began being exported to markets like the US. It arrived here in 1972 as the B1600, making 94 horsepower, and in 75 when the B1800 was introduced, making about 98 horsepower. It's worth mentioning that Mazda also put one of their rotary engines into the truck and brought it here briefly and received very good reviews for the time. Early trucks from Ford had been based off the Model T, and over the decades had offered less expensive trim lines of their F-Series, as well as offering their car-based Ute the Ranchero since 1957, first based off their custom sedan and lasting until 1979 through 7 generations. Ford had used the Courier name from 1952 to 1960 for a commercial panel van based on their full-size cars, and in 1972 resurrected the name for their version of the then-new Mazda B-Series trucks. Like other domestic manufacturers, Ford was surprised at the popularity of the Toyota and Datsun pickups and searched for a quick fix and began a multi-decade-long partnership with Mazda. The new Courier had a 4-speed manual, an optional 3-speed auto, and a load capacity of 1,400 pounds, and like other trucks like the Chevy Love, it was imported as a cab chassis with the bed to be added on later to get around the 25% chicken tax. The differences between the Mazda and Ford were minimal and mostly at the front, where the Courier received a grille more in line with the F-Series and dual headlights instead of the Mazda's quads. In 1976, a 5-speed manual became an option. The second generation of the Courier debuted in 77 with a larger cab, redesigned bed, revised styling, and an optional 2.3-liter 4 used in the Pinto, and the base engine was increased to 2 liters in 1979. This generation ended in 1982 in the US and Canada, while the Courier continued to be sold globally. Interestingly, between 79 and 82, Jet Industries bought Ford Couriers without engines and fitted them with DC motors and lead-acid batteries and sold the Electravan 750. Top speed was 70 miles an hour and range was up to 60 miles. The Courier lived on through a third generation until 1998, once again based on the Mazda, and a fourth generation Mazda based but now renamed as the Ranger, except in Australia, sold worldwide until 2007. The Courier was also used for a car-based van in Europe from 91 and in Brazil as a Ute after 98. Ford began planning a domestically designed and built replacement for the Courier in 1976 under the moniker Project Yuma. Ford believed that by 1985, compact pickups would represent 50% of all pickup sales, and the project focused on quality and fuel economy. Extensive wind tunnel testing yielded a 0.45 drag coefficient, better than a contemporary Mustang, and lightweight materials used throughout help reduce weight. Ford research uncovered that truck buyers wanted more space inside than other small trucks, including a larger ashtray and a bed that could hold a 4x8 sheet of plywood, which Ford accommodated by adding indents into the sidewalls, allowing for supports to hold material above the wheel wells. Ford took the Ranger name from a mid-level trim used on their F-Series since 1965, and in 1982 replaced that trim with the XLS in preparation for their new compact truck. This first generation lasted until 1992 with many changes, but the truck began selling in March '82 as an '83 model and priced at just over $6,200, or about $19,000 in today's money, and with a payload up to 1,600 pounds. Its chassis was developed for the truck with twin I-beam front suspension, part-time four-wheel drive as an option, 3 wheelbases of 107.9 with the 6-foot bed, 113.9 for the 7-foot, and in '86 when the Super Cab was introduced, 125-inch wheelbase. In '83, the Bronco 2, based on this version of the chassis, was introduced and replaced in '99 with the Explorer, once again based on the Ranger. Through the 9 years it was sold, multiple engines were offered and upgraded. The 2-liter Pinto engine was upsized to a 2.3-liter in '83 and upgraded to fuel injection in '85 and lasted all the way through 1992. A 2.8-liter V6, then a 2.9, and then a 4-liter were offered, as well as briefly Ford's 3-liter Vulcan V6. They also experimented with diesel offerings, first with a 2.2-liter Mazda unit making 59 horsepower, and then later a Mitsubishi 2.3-liter making 86 horsepower. Trim lines were the S intended for fleet sales, the Ranger, XL, SLX with bucket seats, and the XLT. In '85, the STX was introduced for the 4x4s, and in '87, the STX High Rider package with increased ground clearance, heavy-duty shocks, light bar and tubular grille guard, and revised suspension and drivetrain components. Between '87 and '89, the Ranger GT was offered with a 140 horsepower 2.9-liter V6 on a regular cab 2-wheel drive body with a limited slip differential, roll bars, and performance tires. In '86, the instrument cluster was revised before a 1989 mid-cycle update with new fenders, hood, grille, flush-mounted halogen headlights, and a redesigned interior. The 2.3-liter got twin spark plugs and power increased to 100 horsepower. The 160 horsepower 4-liter V6 was introduced, and rear anti-lock brakes became available. The second generation was introduced for model year '93, largely based on the same chassis but totally redesigned sheet metal that no longer mimicked the larger F-Series, nor did it look like the Explorer. Much more aerodynamic, the hood was lowered, the doors larger, flush side glass, and the cab was widened nearly 3 inches and being nearly the size of the mid-sized Dodge Dakota. And the 4-wheel drive now had touch drive option with automatic locking front hubs. The base engine was that 2.3-liter 4-cylinder, now massaged to 98 horsepower, a 3-liter V6 making 140, and a 4-liter making 160, with a 5-speed manual as standard for all 4 engines, but with an optional 4-speed automatic. For the trim lines, the S was canceled, and the XL became the base offering, with XL Sport, XLT, and STX, and with 2-wheel drive and 4-wheel drive trucks having different grills. With the new truck came a new trim with a step-side bed called the Splash, lowered with a monochromatic look, decals, bucket seats, and the grille from the 4-wheel drive trucks. It became itself a bit of a cultural icon. In 1995, it got a mid-cycle refresh. On the exterior, it got a new grille now shared between the 2-wheel drive and 4-wheel drive versions, and inside it received the second-generation Explorer dash and driver's airbag. The 3-liter engine was now making 145 horsepower, the inline 4 was up to 112, and the 4-speed was replaced with 2. The 4R44E on the base engines and a heavier-duty 4R55E for the 4-liter, and itself replaced with a 5-speed automatic in 1997. Also in '95, the front brakes got 2 piston calipers, and 4-wheel anti-lock was standard on the 4-wheel drive trucks. In '94, the Mazda and Ford partnership came full circle as Mazda adopted the Ranger platform, and their truck was built in Ford factories through 2009. The third generation launched in 1998 and lasted until 2011. While visually updated but similar to the previous generation, this time the chassis, suspension, and drivetrain were upgraded. The frame was redesigned with the rails forward of the firewall finally fully boxed, wheelbases lengthened, and the long-used twin I-beam suspension replaced with a short long arm layout, and finally a rack and pinion steering setup. 3 wheelbases were offered in 111.6 inches for the 2-door with a 6-foot bed, 117.6 two-door with a 7-foot bed, and 125.9-inch for the Super Cab. That Super Cab got the option of 2 rear-hinged doors, being the first compact truck to have them. The base engine was now a 2.5-liter Lima 4-cylinder, now making 117 horsepower. The 3-liter and 4-liter V6s carried over. A Mazda-made 5-speed manual was standard, and the previous 4 and 5-speed autos carried over. In 2001, the 2.5-liter was dropped and replaced with the Duratec 2.3-liter dual overhead cam, making 135 horsepower, and upgraded to 143 horsepower in 2004. The 4-liter got overhead cams in 2001 and now made 207 horsepower, and it was now paired with the M5OD-R1 HD heavier duty transmission, and the 3-liter got bumps in power multiple times until 2008, when it was finally canceled, being the only vehicle in Ford's lineup still using the engine. In 2001, the front was redesigned, and in 2004, the grille was redesigned to a familial resemblance with the F-150. The interior got a refreshening with new seats, steering wheel, and instrument panel. At launch, the XL and XLT trims continued, the STX was canceled, and the Splash only lasted until 1998. In 1999, sport and off-road options were offered, and in 2000, the XL Trailhead was introduced, offering the suspension and ride height of the 4x4s in a two-wheel drive vehicle. In 2001, this became the Ranger Edge, later renamed in 2006 as the Sport to free the Edge name up for their new midsize SUV. In 2002, a new top-of-the-line was offered called the FX4 with a 4-liter V6, 4x4 limited slip differentials, and 3 skid plates, Bilstein shocks, Alcoa wheels with 31-inch tires. Successful, Ford in 2003 introduced the FX4 Off-Road, intended as a less expensive version with Ford standard equipment and no limited slip. Also in 2002, they introduced the Tremor, largely an appearance package with substantially upgraded audio package. Ford had intended to redesign the Ranger for 2004, but the project was canceled, then continued until 2008, and the truck continued to languish until the end of a short run in 2012. Without substantial updates, sales continued to slip to around 55,000 a year at the end. There are a couple of other special models to highlight from this generation while we're here. The Ranger never got a crew cab like some competitors in the US, and in 2001 Ford attempted to address that hole in the market with the SportTrac. Larger than the Ranger, it was based largely on the Explorer and functioned as a mid-size pickup on a 125.9-inch wheelbase, matching the Ranger's Super Cab. The bed was model-specific and famously entirely of a composite material. A second generation was introduced in 2007, and following the Explorer update of 2006, it now had a redesigned frame with a 130.5-inch wheelbase, 4-wheel independent suspension, and offered a 4.6-liter V8 as an option. During development, Ford's SVT team developed the Adrenaline, with a supercharged version of the V8 making 390 horsepower and intended as a 2007 replacement for the F-150 Lightning. The project was canceled, but in 2008 it became an option package with many design elements, but not the V8. Also for this Ranger generation is the Ranger EV, Ford's first all-electric production vehicle. Offered from 1998 to 2002, it was technically built on the Explorer chassis, and most had nickel metal hydride batteries, with a few lead acid offered for fleet sales. Essentially, it was a Ranger XL 4x2 regular cab with a lightly modified instrument panel. It had a 90 horsepower motor powered by a 25 module battery pack, giving up to 74 miles of range at 60 miles an hour and about 115 miles at 45. The SAE rating for it was 82 miles. With an indicated price of over $52,000, or about $96,000 in today's money, Ford offered a 3-year lease that with federal and California credits could get the payment down to $155 a month. The Ranger EV only lasted until 2002, and estimated production was about 1,500 units. After the Ranger ended in 2012, Ford watched the Chevy Colorado return in 2014 to the U.S. The Ranger had kept being developed and sold overseas, with Ford Australia designing the global 2011 replacement on the T6 platform. And for 2019, Ford brought this platform back to the US once again slotted beneath the F-150, but now as a mid-sized truck. The model was upgraded to meet the U.S. crash standards with changes such as a revised front bumper, rear view camera, and while increasing capabilities such as using fully boxed frame rails. Wheelbases were standardized to just one at 127 inches and in two four-door body styles called Super Cab and Super Crew. The truck was also offered with just one powertrain, the turbocharged 2.3-liter EcoBoost, making 270 horsepower, all routed through a 10-speed automatic. Trim lines were the XL, XLT, and Lariat with Chrome, STX, Sport, and FX option packages available. An off-road focused FX4 was released, and in 2021 the Tremor returned, but this time with more serious off-road chops. The T6 platform was developed into the T6.2 with the North American market in mind from the start, and the truck was redesigned, going on sale globally in 2022 and in the US in 2024. The chassis was lengthened to 128.7, it was widened, the exterior brought into alignment with the corporate face for the F-150, and the interior heavily revised. The 2.3-liter EcoBoost carries over, but it now has a 2.7-liter EcoBoost V6 as an option, making 315 horsepower through that 10-speed automatic. Trim lines initially remained as the XL, XLT, and Lariat, while the off-road focused Raptor with a 3-liter EcoBoost V6 making 405 horsepower was also introduced. The Ranger and its predecessor, the Courier, have lasted for over 50 years and have been a global sales success. Here at home, there are many who think the Ranger was the best compact pickup truck for about 20 years, and fans would say it's been even longer than that. But to me, Ford starved the Ranger of innovation and development in the 90s, instead pushing resources into the F-150, especially during the development of their aluminum-bodied F-150s. Ultimately, they watched competitors remain in the market or return as Chevy did, while the Ranger sat forgotten for over 8 years, or nearly 8 years, until they brought what was an 8-year-old platform back to the U.S. Sales were solid for the returned Ranger, dropping dramatically with supply chain constraints and strong competition. And it's a little too early to determine if the new Ranger that was just released will end up being a strong seller and be able to remain so in the face of a refreshed Colorado and a new Tacoma that's come out. But Ford seems to have found a newfound focus, no pun intended, on its now mid-sized truck offering. Thanks for being here, and a special thanks to my Patreons who help make this possible. If you support independent news, opinions, reviews, and histories like this, please show the video some love with a thumbs up, leave a comment below. Be sure to subscribe and click the little bell if you haven't. Thanks so much for being here. Also for this Ranger generation is the Ranger EV, Ford's first all-electric